Alrighty, hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Serving Nerve, where we talk about whatever we want, and today we're going to be going through Man vs. Street, dating advice for incels. So we're just going to be going through a guy, asking a bunch of girls if they would date an incel, why or why not. A quick little rundown is if you do not know what an incel is, it does stand for involuntary celibate, so if you just can't score, you've never been scoring chicks or whatever. But over the years, the categorization of an incel has kind of expanded itself to be, the stereotypical, online creep, can't score a date, guy who hates women, but also worships them and wants them, but has somewhat sexist views and also is associated with things like school shooters and stuff like that, the typical quiet kid vibes. So, I know that there's a lot that goes around with incels, what an incel is, what people think all incels are. Personally, I just think it's somebody who's involuntarily celibate for whatever reason. I think that guys and girls can be incels. I know the term femcel has been thrown around a lot as well lately, but I usually just lump the term incel with dudes and chicks, because it's like if you can't score, you're involuntarily celibate. Like, if you just can't get anybody, but you want somebody, and maybe you want to punch your V card, but you can't, you're involuntarily celibate. I would say it's more common for dudes to be incels than girls, but still, I kind of categorize it for both, sexes, I guess. So that's just my opinion. If you disagree, by all means, put your comments down below, but I'm going to be going through dating advice for incels, Man vs. Street, and we're just going to give our opinion, because if you haven't known, I have been what I've categorized as an incel for a while. Not really anymore, but I used to kind of make jokes about being an incel because I also never scored. I kind of think being an incel is a little bit subjective. There are some people out there who are categorized as incels when maybe they're just bedroom dwellers who can't score and they don't really have any political views or anything like that that are particularly crazy. I've made jokes about being an incel before because I think it's funny, and I also just have had terrible luck with dating and scoring dates and scoring people that I like. But, we're gonna give our opinion and perspective on whatever this is, and we'll just see where it goes. Alrighty, my people, I just want to interject that I do have a Patreon, and I do want to point out that if you want to support the channel, there is exclusive content on there, and I upload once a week. So yeah, if you want to check it out and support the channel, cool. If not, then let's get on with the video.
Would you ever date an incel?
No.
Not if it, what if it was for a good cause, like saving the planet or stopping a school shooting?
No.
I would let the incel fuck a fish to save the kids.
So you guys know what an incel is?
Men on the internet who hate women, but also worship them.
A man that can't get girls and blames girls for it.
It's basically men who hate women because they can't get any. Because they suck so badly, and they blame women because they just can't get their dick wet.
So I can't really disagree with the chicks who are explaining what an incel is, because that is what it commonly connotates with. But the one thing I do want to say is I have dated an incel before. And I actually was in a long-term, considerably long-term relationship with that person. It was a year. And I personally had a bad experience. Now, I don't want to say that this is true for all incels, but the dude that I was going out with was 100% an incel, still a virgin, and acted like a sexist twat at times.
Date an incel in any scenario?
No fucking shot, bro. No fucking shot.
What if it was to stop a school shooting?
No.
Still wouldn't?
Yeah, I would go on a date to stop a school shooting. Yeah.
All right, that's all they needed to hear.
This is a weird thing, is I don't actually know how many incels are school shooters. I think that's a weird stereotype, because I'm sure there are so many incels out there. And also, I don't think going on a date with somebody would just stop them from becoming I don't know, a horrible person or a menace to society or something like that. So I think that's a weird stereotype that's dragged on, but I could be totally wrong. I don't know. I think it takes a little bit more to become that demented,
What's your name again? Let's hold the camera.
It's wifey material, and I feel I don't know, I need a lot of diamonds on my finger for that.
Still no?
Still no.
Fuck them kids?
I hate that question.
It's not a good one.
I want to fuck them, but I date them.
Would you fuck them for the kids?
I'd probably pull some backhand shit where it was a fish or something. I don't know. I don't know.
Throw a fish down there?
If I had to.
You can fit a fish down there?
No, for him. He'd be fucking the fish. I'm not fucking the fish. I would let the incel fuck a fish to save the kids.
This is such a confused scope of logic. Now, I don't think I'd date an incel. I don't think it would stop anything bad from happening. But I'm just saying, I don't really know how common this is, and this is something I actually think requires a little input, because the stereotype is, like, incels, all sexist, all school shooter types, all this, all that. Now, I can see the sexist thing. I personally think that if you're not going to be able to score long term, you might start going like, it's not me, because I've tried with so many different women. It's actually the women. Women in general are just evil, and they all deserve to be kept down because they're evil. But I love women because I want to date them and have sex with them. Logic. So I think the problem is that if you are left alone for a consistent amount of time and constantly failing with dates, you will start stereotyping, like, all women as, like, you know, the whole incel perception of women. And I think it kind of goes the same for women. Like, the women I've talked to who have very bad stints of dating have very sexist, in my opinion, somewhat sexist perceptions of men, where it's like, all men are evil, they all do the same thing, you know, they're all dogs, that kind of thing, and you can't get a good guy. Like, that idea of a good guy isn't real anymore, because they've also had such a bad stint of dating, maybe not, you know, not being able to score like an incel can't, but, you know, just having a bad stint of dating and not being able to keep somebody long-term because they are also terrible people that they've dated. So it also leads to that perception, that sexist perception of women towards men. I think it's actually a common issue where women have had the same perceptions develop, but women are more sought after sexually, I think, than men. And I think that in the wake of, you know, finding somebody to fornicate with, it's easier to fornicate as a woman than a guy, because, like, you'll probably be able to find somebody who will want to have sex with you if you're a woman. But women have usually higher sexual standards on the basis of safety than men do when it comes to finding somebody to bang. I hope that makes sense. Tell me what you guys think about that in the comments below, but personally, I think that people develop, after a series of bad relationships or attempted relationships, they develop a very sexist perception of the sex that they personally are inclined towards.
Love the kids. Love the kids.
Alright.
I still wouldn't date an incel because I also love myself.
My thoughts on incels are men hate women because they cannot get a date, and men and women hate men because they're afraid of getting raped and murdered.
It's not our fault.
I think the other thing is women do have a high subset of standards, and this is what creates the whole femcel energy. Women have these standards that they apply to men that sometimes they can't fulfill because they aren't as good as they think they are. And this is also what builds that femcel vibe. It's like, men should date me. I'm a woman. You know, it's not like I have to have standards for myself. You know, when I've gone through some of these compilations of, like, the fat acceptance compilations, the dating compilations, I've seen this theme where some of the women, they don't really take care of themselves. They expect to not provide as much as they're given. Like, they want somebody to put an expensive ring on it and hold them up on a pedestal and take care of them. And then they just want everything given to them. But they don't want to provide as much in the wake of, like, finances, income. Maybe they're not particularly extroverted. Maybe they're not, you know, sexually as sexy, I guess. Maybe they're not considered conventionally pretty, and they also have this perception of, like, why won't men want to date me? Or, like, no men can handle this, you know? But in reality, they also just can't score because they have really, like, low standards for themselves, and all they attract is low standard guys. So, like, I think that's also an issue, and it creates a whole femcel vibe. So I think incels and femcels, although the intentions and the perceptions are a little bit different of the individuals, I think that both incels and femcels categorically do the same thing, where they don't work on themselves as much as they expect other people to work for them or kind of, like, provide for them. That's at least from my own perception and the personal experiences that I've had, but I wouldn't say that's for everybody. I think that's just a common issue. The one thing I have to also say is I think that there are a lot of people out there that would be categorized as an incel more so than anything else that are working towards their own, like, you know, betterment. They might just not be adequate enough. They might not be considered, like, super sexy, or they might not be considered, I don't know, very extroverted. I think those are, like, the two main things. Outside of being financially competent, I think the main things that girls particularly look at are looks for guys. But even if you can't provide, like, the most ideal of looks, as long as you, like, groom yourself well, the number one thing that's going to be important for you is probably being sociable and extroverted. And that's something that I've seen that's commonly problematic for incels. And also, I know I keep saying incels, but I think that's just a generational issue that's kind of come up over the years for both men and women. People are particularly bad nowadays at socializing and being extroverted, and I'm not sure if it's because we all dwell on the internet too much or we don't get as much, social interaction, but for both men and women, I've seen this commonly as an issue, where when it comes to actually interacting, people just kind of like go in on themselves, they act really introverted, and they can't actually expand themselves outwards to create that conversation and then bridge a friendship or bridge some kind of interaction. And then when they actually do that, in some cases, I think that creates such a rarity for them, that social interaction's so rare, that they think the person might be flirting with them when they really aren't.
It's because you're a dick.
Think if incels know that girls aren't objects, they'll actually be able to get a date.
So do you have any advice for incels on how they can get girls if they were in that, mentality?
Stop sucking.
Get off the fucking computer.
We need to get them.
That is a thing. Getting off the computer is very important because your perception of relationships is going to be completely destroyed by the internet. The other thing is the whole girls aren't objects thing. Both men and women do this, and I think it's pretty bad. We do objectify one another just on the basis of the way that we look or what we can provide for each other. We don't actually look at each other on the basis of personality, I think, as much as what a guy can provide for us as a woman, or what a woman can look like and stand as to us as a man. I think that can actually be an issue where you're not looking for personality or for somebody who is appealing to you. You're looking for somebody that you can objectify. And again, that's for both men and women. In fact, I've heard women do the same thing, particularly with men. Oh, a guy has to be hot, rockin' abs, be super, gentleman-like, but also be sexy. And then he also has to be rich and put a ring on it, and he also has to be part of the top, 1% or whatever. And that's also not super realistic. So I think women tend to objectify men just as much. It's just not talked about as much because people are more inclined to talk about women being objectified than men, but whatever.
We need to get them some girls. So we're asking people for dating advice.
They don't deserve girls. If they have game and money,
If they have
it
game
doesn't
and
matter.
money, doesn't matter.
You just have to talk,
Whatever you want to
have
do.
money, and it's fine.
Vagina? Vagina's way easier to find than you think it is.
Maybe if you were nicer to girls,
This is very difficult because I think half of these women also are going to be brasher than what you would expect on a common sit down because they're on the street, they're probably rocking those buzzes. So the perspectives of these women might be a little bit more brash. The way they're saying things might be a little bit more brash because they're out with their friends, they're partying. I'm going to give some grace here because some of these girls sound kind of mean, but if they're out having girls' nights, getting drunk, I feel like they're not going to be thinking about what they're saying and maybe how rude it comes off. So I'm going to give some grace in that regard and kind of brush over that. But some of these women are coming off as kind of mean. And I know that we're talking about incels here. So the stereotype for an incel is pretty brutal. And I know that they're operating under that stereotype. But I don't think that the blanket term incel is the same in my head as what they're thinking. Because when I think incel, I just think somebody who can't score. Maybe doesn't groom well, doesn't part their hair well, has bedroom dweller vibes, maybe spends too much time on the internet and stuff. But I don't think of them as murderous school shooters who objectify all women. I think that it's just guys who can't score basically and don't have what one would connotate as riz nowadays. But I don't know, man.
they want to fuck you.
I need to go on a fucking walk.
They need to go to, Mexico and do ayahuasca and purge their demons.
We get these guys laid by getting them experiences with fucking women.
And do DMT and shrooms.
Just literally talk to every single girl. And eventually,
Spam it.
someone's gonna say yes.
Enter.
And go to Alaska for 6 weeks in the wilderness by themselves.
Be direct. Tell them what you like. Tell them what you want. Don't be so eager. If I was on a date with someone, I would want someone to tell me what they want to do to me.
What they want to do.
That's a way more reasonable, except for the whole what you want to do to me vibe. Having a direct conversation with somebody instead of looking for false flags is way more effective. Actually being able to sit down, one, be extroverted, date around, but also be extroverted and try and have conversations with people, learn those social skills. That's one of the number one things. Then also be forward with people and be this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for. whatever. Maybe don't just ask for sex, obviously, but like, you know, be like, I'm looking for a relationship where X, Y, and Z is a thing, because then eventually you're gonna find a girl who's gonna be into that, or you'll find a girl who can kind of go along with it, especially if you can provide things for them. It doesn't always have to be financial, by the way. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's more like an experience basis, and again, even if you're poor as balls, if you are good with your mouth, particularly in a talking regard, alright, that usually can help you score chicks. And I think that's the number one thing that a lot of people don't think to do. It's like everybody's very materialistic, both men and women. So much so, where they think, I need money, I need to take them out to a fancy place, take them on a date, get them flowers, get them chocolates. Some of that stuff's kind of cute, like if you get a girl flowers or something. But the number one thing is, just make yourself look presentable and adequate, and then also have a good conversation with them. And a lot of the time, conversation is not a commonality. Conversation doesn't stick. So if you talk to somebody, and then you talk them into going on a date with you, and you talk to them on the date, and you stick with them in their mind, that is one of the best things you can do in any relationship regard, in any dating regard, and it's quite a rarity. Out of all of the dates that I've been on, and I've been on a fair amount, the ones that I've had the best experiences with are the ones where you can carry a good conversation with the individual.
Do you, is there something?
Yeah. Oh, pussy shit.
They need to watch the Barbie movie.
Say I met you in a bar and you happen to be someone who hasn't had a lot of experience with women.
Don't listen to Andrew Tate and go to therapy.
Okay. Andrew Tate's also a terrible form of dating advice. Some of these women also have terrible dating advice, though, and I'm gonna assume it's just because half of them are drunk and the other half are stupid. But when it comes to this kind of thing, I think the number one thing that they are correct about and that everybody should be on point with is conversation. Like, the more conversation you can carry, the better. Not even just in a dating regard, just in a social regard. Like, that's a super important component that I think a lot of people miss out on. But to me, the entire concept of, like, incels and femcels, it's a little bit moronic. The problem I have with the whole categorization of incels is, like, these kinds of perceptions that people have towards incels sometimes is warranted. Sometimes you're gonna run into somebody who's, like, freaking absolutely insane, like the typical stereotypical, you know, hating women, greasy, gross guy who hides behind a computer and can't score and thinks he should be able to and that he should have access to all these women. And I think that's a much more extreme perception that a lot of people have towards incels, when in reality, I think it's guys who just lack social skills and might be socially ignorant, and also might not have a good track record around women. I think that's a much more common issue. If you can't socialize, that might just make you already, like, have issues with girls. Like, I know people who are insanely awesome people who are considered incels. They just can't find somebody who's, like, a woman for them because they just aren't socially competent, you know? They go out, they do their own thing, they live their lives. They're not considered super ugly, they're not considered super ungroomed, they're not considered like little bedroom dwellers, they go out and do stuff, but they just aren't socially competent. So I think the number one thing that's important is that socialization, and that's for men and women, and also not to stereotype men or women in an incel and femcel regard, but also more so on the basis that if you've got one bad date or a series of bad dates lined up, or if you can't score a date, not to stereotype all men or all women in the same category of all the people that you've dealt with thus far, because I think that'll shoot you in the foot. That'll give you a terrible perception of men and women, and also of potential dating. But that's just my opinion, so tell me what you think in the comments below, my people. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think about all of this? And what do you think about incels, and femcels, and whatever, and dating, and socialization, and not being able to score? And yeah, that's it. So I hope y'all enjoyed, my people, and I'll see you all next time. It has been lovely. Slater!